Now let's put aside the small storm that erupted between the southern nation and the northern oppressor. And let's take a nice balanced look at what happened in this debate and what the vote really allows you to do. I'm going to do this by looking through two analytical lenses. First, which side is legally just? Second, which side promotes the political scene? So let's look first at the question of legal justice. And what do we hear coming out of proposition? We heard first of all this idea of a magical balance where we would have mandatory voting tied in tandem with education for voters, and this would empower them to succeed. However, we never saw an explanation from them as to why education wouldn't work as well on this side of the house in opposition. In fact, they chose to drop the initial analogy they raised, which was the basis of the legal justification. That what we need to do is find people and incentivize them to go to the polls. They never gave us a response to the idea that innocent parties aren't harmed. So they decided to reduce their case and talk about how minorities must be heard in their second speaker. This was first of all obviously a reduction of the case, but in the second place they conceded the alternatives we raised from the beginning to voting as a means of political expression. When we talked about public protest, when we talked about petitions, all they said was, well, voting is, I quote, a major option. A major assertion which we attacked throughout the debate when we talked about the more nuanced intensity of opinion which can be expressed in protest about specific issues. For example, that's why by the end of the debate, they retreated in their third speaker to talk about how political awareness was in general a good thing and we needed to, I quote, reflect acceptance of the government. The point was we'd already answered this in the middle of the debate when my second speaker said, there is a very big difference between a large mandate and an artificial mandate, a mandate that doesn't reflect the true wishes of the people. We sustained this argument by responding to this idea of minority abuse by saying that the apathetic majority would drown them out. We sustained this argument through the debate, but didn't see a response. That's why when they finally tried to come up with this analogy to compulsory education, we again broke it by saying there isn't a comparable benefit when we're talking about compulsory education and compulsory voting. In contrast, opposition arguments were far more consistent. We talked consistently about the right to vote as a choice, not an obligation, a principle that wasn't attacked down the table. We talked about how voting shouldn't be about a social experiment, a rebuttal they didn't hit. We talked about the importance of allowing people to choose when and why they want to vote when they're ready. And that's why on the first issue, we took the legal ground. Let's now talk about the political scene and its promotion. Proposition argued that we must ensure that governments listen to non-voters too. We pointed out that non-voters could be heard even if they didn't vote, and that's why they decided, well, maybe that wasn't tenable, so perhaps we'll ensure that people stay interested in the political scene. Again, they just argued that protests, public petitions, and a whole stack of other forms of political expression were minor options. And that's why by the end of the debate, they said, well, perhaps the vote is really special, because without the vote, the government has no clue about what's on your mind. That's what their third speaker said. But frankly, we've shown you throughout the debate that it quite clearly reflects something is going wrong with the government and they can respond. And we furthered this with our second speaker's argumentation, which was never attacked, about this idea of how voters who are now resentful that they're being forced to turn up at polling stations are going to vote for radical parties as a matter of rebellion against the political system, drowning out minority voices who need their rights to be protected in an optimistic manner. That's why, on the issue of political scene, we took both the majority and the minority. Hence, because we justified voting as a choice that you can make when you want to, we are the side you choose.